Good evening. Welcome to Elyria City Council meeting for July 10th, 2023. At this time, I'd like to have a moment of reflective silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Tillett, would you please lead us in the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. He does that every meeting. Thank you, Mr. Tillett. If everyone can please turn off their phones or turn them down to silent, it'd be greatly appreciated for the meeting. Mr. Clerk, I have a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Callahan. Here. Mr. Sierra. Here. Mr. Oswald.
Here.
Mr. Corbin.
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Tillett.
Here.
Mr. Lippian. Here. Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Mrs. Simmons.
Here.
Mr. Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Stewart.
Here.
All present.
Public hearings.
We have one. You are hereby notified that a public hearing will be held Monday, July 10th, 2023 at 7 p.m. to consider the following. Notice is hereby given that copies of the proposed tax budget, estimated encumbrances, balances, estimate revenues, and estimated expenditures of the City of Elyria, Lorain County of Lorain, State of Ohio, for the calendar fiscal year of 2024 will be on file beginning Friday, June 23rd, 2023 in the offices of the City Finance Director and the Clerk of Council, and will be available to the public inspection by contacting the Finance or the Council offices pursuant to the requirement of the law. The proposed tax budget indicates the estimates, revenues, estimated encumbrances, balances, and estimated expenditures for the year 2024.
Are there any proponents?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ted Pileski, 131 Court Street, Elyria, Ohio, 44035. So as you know, the tax budget is a document that's required by state law to be passed every year and filed with the Lorain County Budget Commission. So what we are considering tonight is the 2024 tax budget. It begins with an estimated cash for each fund by fund type, estimated revenues to come in 2024, estimated expenditures, and then estimated cash at the end of 2024. So when the year is completed, I will amend the document with the Budget Commission to replace estimated cash with actual cash on hand by fund type, and then amend estimated revenues as they come in or don't come in throughout the course of the year. So upon your approval, I will file the document with the Lorain County Budget Commission.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Pileski. So any questions for Mr. Pileski? Are there any other proponents?
Yes, Council
Mayor
President.
Whitfield?
Yeah, so just to build on what Director Pileski just mentioned in terms of those revenue projections, one thing that we've seen in my time in office since the pandemic, we've seen an increase in our income tax revenue. And I know there was a lot of concern with the loss of Bendix and how that would impact us as a city. And though we have felt it, we're proud of the companies like Ridge, like Duraline, like Multilink, even some of our public partners here in the city, like the community college and the county government, that have really helped us not only deal with the blow of Bendix, but we've come out even greater than that. So I appreciate the projections that the director has put together, and I'm excited to see how we continue to exceed these expectations in the future.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? Are there any opponents? I declare this public hearing has been held.
An ordinance adopting the tax budget of the City of Elyria, Ohio for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tillett.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Mr. Tolet, this is an emergency as well?
Excuse me. I'd like to add the emergency to it as well.
Concur.
The second concurs. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency.
Excuse me.
Mr. President, I'm sorry, this is
A roll call?
a roll call vote,
Okay.
please. Thank you.
On the suspension, roll call vote?
On the suspension, Mr. Callahan.
Aye.
Mr. Sierra.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Corbin.
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Tolet.
Aye.
Mr. Lippian.
Aye.
Mrs. Davis.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Schneider.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart.
Aye.
All ayes. On the emergency, Mr. Callahan.
Aye.
Mr. Sierra.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Corbin.
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Tolet.
Aye.
Mr. Lippian.
Aye.
Mrs. Davis.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Schneider.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart.
Aye.
All ayes on the passage. Mr. Callahan.
Aye.
Mr. Sierra.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mr. Corbin.
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Tolet.
Aye.
Mr. Lippian.
Aye.
Mrs. Davis.
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons.
Aye.
Mr. Schneider.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart.
Aye.
All ayes. Oh, I'm sorry. Ordinance 2023-90. 90.
Can I get approval of the minutes?
So
Moved by Mr. Sarah. Second. Second by Mr. Sarah. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Guess there's somebody making an announcement over and through there for the Marine Corps? Very good. Remarks from city officials. Mayor Whitfield.
Good evening, Council President, council members, and residents. Just a few things I wanted to share in terms of I have made a mistake, and I want to be transparent about the mistake I made. I ran a 5K Saturday, and I haven't run a 5K since the last 5K, so I'm very achy right now and tired, but I'm pressing through. But on a serious note, we had a young person we wanted to acknowledge today, and I don't think they're here. They did some heroic acts to help save their family, but we had a proclamation for them, but hopefully
Yeah,
at the
we were
future meeting.
we were going to do that during Captain Groon's remarks, but hopefully they're going to be here.
Okay.
We're hopeful for that, but we'll wait to see when they get here, and if we've got to push it back, we'll do that, because
Okay.
I think it's well worth
Yeah, for sure.
for that, so.
And then just, we have some guests here that we've invited, and thank you. Part of the request we had from you all was to hear reports from our grant writers. And, over the past 3 years, we've secured millions of dollars of grants working with Macaulay and Company, including our city's largest grant ever to our police department that's helping us to retain officers. So I'm excited to hear the presentation today, but also open for any questions that you might have.
Any questions for the mayor? Okay. Oh, Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. President. So recently, we had a meeting about cameras and potential security for downtown. Do you know where we're at with that?
Yep. Through you, Council President, to Councilman Sarah. So, one of the things Councilman Sarah brought to us a couple months ago was an update. He wanted to hear an update, and he wanted to see cameras installed at Pioneer Plaza. And so we hosted a meeting last week, I want to say, or the week before, and Councilman Sarah joined us in our meeting with IT, communications, the police department, our office, to really look at a holistic view of our camera system in the city. Because right now we have cameras being installed for our traffic. We have them being installed in hot spots in our community where we need to do more enforcement of crime, or law enforcement towards crime. And then we also have these sort of park needs, and we have cameras being installed in the park. So I think Councilman Sarah got a chance to hear some of the challenges we deal with internally in terms of waiting because of supply chain issues, waiting on cameras, and when we get those cameras, making sure we're getting them installed as soon as possible. So the short answer is yes, we are installing cameras not only downtown, we've installed new cameras on Ely Square. We're going to have more cameras installed downtown, including on Pioneer Plaza, as well as with our traffic system. There'll be new cameras. There will be license plate readers on our traffic to help our traffic system, and we're still open to other ideas. One of the things we were exploring in some communities like Akron, the businesses bought into a ring system or some other private sector system, and then they can allow our police department to tap into that system if something happens. So that's something we're looking at as well. The price tag was pretty hefty on that. I think we both agree on that. It was kind of hefty, the annual price. So we're trying to see if we can do something internally without that, $100,000 plus price tag annually to keep up with the system that was presented to us. So stay on us, keep pushing us forward, and we will make sure that we get adequate camera system installed. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it would be important to note that the cameras that we were talking about, they're not being monitored 24/7. We're not watching what everybody's doing all the time. They're going to be more used for going back after there's an offense and being able to try to corral some of that vandalism and littering and that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for the mayor? Very good. Safety Service Director, Mr. Lundy.
Thank you, Council President. We have a good update for you tonight. We've been in many conversations with the management company of High Point Apartments. It looks like those talks have yielded some positive results for the city. We were able to confirm today that High Point has in fact paid its property taxes in full. That's good for the city because liens of nearly $84,000 were placed on the property for unpaid water bills. We expect this to hit our books of utilities within the next 4 weeks. So $83,902 will be coming to the city that we were concerned about whether we were ever going to see. This is in addition to receiving a recent payment in late June for another bill of $28,000. That's a total of $111,000 now paid. New bill for $14,000 has gone out. We hope the company decides to stay on schedule. And once again, I think it's important to thank Republic Services and Regional Manager Chase Rittenauer for sending out crews right away to pick up an overflowing dumpster problem that was taking place over there. Rittenauer sent out crews on a Saturday when they were actually scheduled to go and pick it up on a Tuesday. That helped out the residents a lot. Residents we've heard are very appreciative of the dumpsters being emptied and our crews cutting the high grass, which we did send a bill for that, by the way. Our crews have been very busy cutting grass, and to date we've sent out over 220 high grass notices. Also want to point out a big thank you to all of our city team members from Parks, Streets, Police, and Fire, all who worked to make the fourth event a big success. Saw a lot of council people at the event and a sea of people were there. Oh my gosh, a lot of folks in one place. People love their fireworks. Carrie Reardon did a great job walking us through the entire planning process, and Lieutenant Lee Frank was very instrumental in putting together a good game plan with the police department. Want to thank him. The event was a huge success. Meetings are already ongoing for the Apple Festival, and I'm sure in the blink of an eye it'll be here before we know it. And that's my report, Council President.
Very good. Very good. Any questions for Mr. Lundy? Mr. Oswald?
Just a comment. Ms. Davis, we've been watching a piece of property over on Midway Boulevard next to McDonald's. And of course, they were sent a letter for tall grass, and we're wondering when it's, so we've been driving by, and there was a guy cutting it with a push mower. And we were watching, I can't believe the kind of job he did. He got it all done with that thing. So sometimes when you send that letter, they do get out and they do it, and that would have been a hefty bill for the city to take care of. So sometimes the letters do make, a good thing, so.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Oswald. Ms. Davis?
Through you, President. Mr. Lundy, you also said that you sent out over 220 high grass letters. Is that what you just stated?
Yes, I did. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are these new or the existing ones? Because I'm calling about the same ones that has been started since we started cutting grass. The areas are still the same. I'm still calling about them. So are these new letters or, because if you already sent the letter once and they still haven't cut it and I'm calling, I don't think they warrant a new letter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are total letters that we've sent out, and we do go and check to see whether they've been cut, and we've had the discussion before about 5-day notice, but actually 8 days, so that it's 3 days after the postage date of the mailing. And, you know, we get a list that's regularly produced, and then we have the crews go out and cut off the list. You know, we try to cut whenever it's not raining, and, you know, we're working through the list, but I can't necessarily say we've gotten all of them yet.
Can I, real quick, through you, Council President, Director Lundy, could you speak to what our process is? Because I think one thing for the residents to know, there's multiple ways you can report high grass to us, and then if you could kind of talk through what happens once we get that report and kind of what that process is.
Sure. We get calls from residents, get calls from council members. Once those come in, we've actually put together a system in New World where we actually list things. So we're not working off of sheets of paper as we were in the past. As a result of putting it into the system, we then have folks who will drive by, take a look, and see if in fact that looks to be the case, so that we're not seeing some erroneous reporting. Then as a result, when we find out, yeah, the grass is still there, then we actually send out the letters. After the time expires, because of the New World system that we put in place, then we can send a crew out there again to find out if it's been mowed or not, and then it ends up on a hit sheet to be cut. So it is, no question about it, a lengthy process. It certainly would be nice if folks took care of things on their own, so we didn't have to address it. But that's the reality of life.
And through you, Council President, I just also want to let the residents know, if this is a neighbor who may be sickly or elderly, you can call our office, and we have relationships with Lorain County Office on Aging. There's a Road to Hope group that's also helping to cut grass. So, you know, sometimes you see the grass, you want it dealt with, but you don't want your neighbor to be harmed. You can call us, and we can try to connect some of those resources to that neighbor as well.
Very good. Any other questions for Safety Service Director Lundy? Okay. Finance Director Plesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recently received notice from the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada that the City of Elyria has been awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is for the annual report for fiscal year ending December 31st, 2021. So dating back to the first report that we did, which was in 1985, the city has received the award 35 times out of 37 reports.
Okay. Again, Finance Director, that's a testament to you and your staff and working all together with all the departments to make sure that you're able to achieve those awards. And it's an incredible accomplishment, and we're very grateful and thankful. We say this all the time, that you're in the position that you're in. We're a better city for it. Thank you. Any questions for Finance Director Plesky? Law Director Deary.
Good evening, everyone. I have no report this evening.
Very good. Elyria Fire Department, Chief Pernesti.
Good evening. It's been a little bit since I've talked to you and wanted to give you a little update on a couple things, some stats, but then also tomorrow I'll be meeting with the company that is doing the assessment of our fire station locations, EMS and the fire service, staffing. I hope to have the draft tomorrow, and hopefully by, I would say, September's council meeting, I'll be able to give you a full report on what they recommend. but we've met many times since this, we organized this and asked for this. The company has been in the city several times. So I think it's going to be it's not going to be, in my opinion, what some people may think of when they think of fire department reports in this city, okay? So it's not going to be as controversial, I don't think, so that's a good thing. A couple other things that I wanted to bring up and talk to you about is our numbers for service are up over 11% than last year. And one of the biggest problems that is affecting the fire department right now is what we call double or triple hits, or the number of times that our units are out on emergencies at the same time. And right now, as of this month, beginning of this month, 46% of our emergencies are taking place all more than one. So if we have one company that's out on a medical call or a non-structure fire call, let's say, they're happening multiple times in that hour. So we have calls occurring multiple times within a period where we have all of our companies tied up. And that is concerning. And most of it is because we don't have the same amount of apparatus and staffing as we had in the past. But through the years, those calls have gone up by a lot, I would say. Last year, we were at 34% of our calls were calls that occurred at the same time, where we have multiple units out at the same time. That also means that stations that are dedicated to, let's say, the north side are responding to the west side, or the centrally located stations responding to the southeast. So all these things have to be started to be looked at, and it's not going to go away, and that's going to be part of the report. I also wanted to touch a little bit on our EMS. So far, our EMS calls are up over last year, and of the calls that we respond on, the calls that we respond with Life Care, we respond about 59% of all the 911 EMS calls this year that have come in for EMS. So that means that 59% of the calls that are coming in for EMS right now are advanced life support or critical nature emergencies that we're responding on. All these things are pretty much resulting in some conversations that we're going to have sooner than later as far as the fire department. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on that. Unfortunately, we've had 3 fatal fires since the beginning of the year. Our structure fires are the same as last year, 46 at this time last year than what we had at this time or right now. So we're on the pace of going on the same amount of structure fires as we had last year. I talked to the mayor today and director. I still want to do some things with smoke detectors. But with that, I will tell you that the calls aren't going away. They're going to continue, and I'm going to be looking for you and the administration to see what we can do for the fire department and to see what we can do to match that service. It's something that we have to do before we really have a problem. The one good thing that I wanted to get you up to speed on also is that we started a building inspection program. When I became chief, one of the things that we had not been able to do because of past cuts from years back was building inspections, where we're going into our commercial buildings, inspecting them for hazards, familiarizing ourselves with them. So in May of this year, we kicked off that process. I created a line item. One of the problems we have with our call volume and not as many stations, not as many apparatus on the streets, is we couldn't fit all these things into our daily duties. So I had asked the administration, we were fortunate to receive a line item where we were going to pay overtime for 2 members, 3 members a day to go out and knock out, do nothing but inspections. They're not dedicated to fire suppression, rescue, nothing. and that has helped considerably. And from May 15th, when we started, to today, we've inspected 530 occupancies. That's a lot, and we wouldn't be able to do that with on-duty staff. So those are good things, and we're preventing fires by getting in these buildings and noticing the hazards. Lastly, I still want to talk, eventually, I think the report will also state this, but I'm still pretty heavy on the fact that we need a fourth dedicated EMS transport unit in the city. Not to steal the thunder of our grant writers, they've done a great job. Unfortunately, FEMA said no to the 2021 ambulance grant that I asked you approved in 2021. They denied that grant. We still have the grant that you approved earlier for a rescue/ambulance transport vehicle that could serve as that fourth functioning unit. But the call volume, it dictates a fourth squad, and it dictates a fourth squad in the city, not in any other city. So I need to work with you on that to try to get that done one way or another. So with that, I'll answer any questions or anything else you have.
And I'll speak to a lot of your bulk of your report, Chief. I know that we've had some conversations, and I think we'll look into more future conversations in regards to addressing the situations with the administration on a path moving forward. There's a lot of more dialogue and what's needed and based on this report, so there'll be some conversations in regard to that. Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. I have two questions for Chief Pernesti. It was interesting to hear this about the call volume. So my first question would be, what do you attribute that to? In your opinion, at this point in time, what do you see the reason in society for getting the calls that we're getting, obviously the increase in calls? I think we know part of the answer, but it'd be nice to get your opinion in regards to that. And then I'll ask the second question when you answer that.
I would say that COVID probably had a lot to do with that. I also think that our population is aging. If you looked in the paper, in the Chronicle, they ran an article, I don't know what day it was, but they stated how the county is aging. And with that comes emergencies. With that comes falls of a traumatic nature where someone breaks their arm, their leg. We roll on that. That's a traumatic injury. Difficulty breathing, all those things. But it's not just delirium. If you were to go to any other city and you were to ask what their EMS calls for service were, they would all say that it's going up. And that's why I'm fighting so hard to get the resources for that. So my medics that are riding on pumpers do not have to sit and wait. They're not. The times are sufficient, in my opinion, from Life Care, but we need more resources to handle the call volume, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And through you, you actually answered the second question already. So you must have known I was going to ask you what the situation was with other cities in regards to the same thing.
They're going up, and without a doubt. But again, we're very blessed to have what we have, and I can't reiterate enough that we can provide a paramedic with all the drugs, everything but transport capabilities, to a resident's front step within minutes. And we're, if you, again, I relate it to the old television show Emergency. I can bring you, Johnny and Roy, to your front step within minutes, and that's what we do.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Tolet.
Through you, Mr. President. I stopped in several months ago at the station, and I asked that same question that Mr. Callahan asked. And one of the things that Chief Pernesti explained to me about why things are different today than when we were kids, and this caught me off guard now when he said this. When we were little, we didn't have 911. That is a very common thing, and it's used on an extremely regular basis today. And the second thing that the chief explained to me is that and please correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Chief, if someone says they're having problems breathing, well, that could be a child with bronchitis or a bad flu. They have to respond at that point. there's no should we go or shouldn't we go. They have to respond if there's any breathing issues. So as far as the increase in calls, it's a combination of many things.
Yeah, good point. That's true. 911 started November of 1988. That's not that long ago. And now I think you have an entire generation that knows no different that when they need help, they dial 911. And that's good. We're going to deliver somebody, whether it's police or fire. We're going to deliver somebody to your doorstep. But it's a problem that every city is facing. It's just, I'm bringing it to your attention. It's my job.
Yeah. Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. First off, I'm glad to see you're doing a lot of inspections, that you got the money and the time to do that. We've been talking about this. Second off, I was wondering, are you giving out any violations and working with the building department? Because we've had a few instances with winds blowing off siding on, if it's on structures of buildings. I still don't see any repairs on it. I see roofs getting blown off in the IFAS stucco on buildings on the strip mall over by Planet Fitness. You know what? I don't see that, anything. You're doing the inspections. I don't know how far you go with this, but do they get turned over to the building department? And is there any follow through? Because here again, doing all that work with no follow through, you throw your hands up.
Well, quickly, I'll say this. Under the direction of Director Calvert, the building department and fire department, our relations really have never been better as far as communication. She's done a phenomenal job. To answer your question just a little bit, this is just my personal opinion. I live in what's called, what I say, a legacy city. We have old buildings. Old buildings, you have gravity and age that is on these buildings. I don't want to continue the staffing issues, but I have a 2-person fire prevention bureau. That's it. It's very difficult to balance all the things. Now, I will say, when we go out and inspect, we're looking for fire code violations. The other violations, we communicate with the building department. I will tell you one other thing that has changed since I became chief that I've pushed on. When there's a violation or there's issues with 123 Main Street in the city of Elyria, we're all able to tap into the computer and look at all those violations at once. We weren't able to do that before. So, we're addressing them, and I would say that it's the best that it's been communication-wise. It's just, we're a legacy city. You fix the siding on one, it's going to fall off of another building. It's gravity, it's age. We're trying to keep up. We give people 30 days to correct fire code violations. And for the most part, they're pretty good about that. But we're doing our work. Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
I'm going to follow up that with, I had Mr. Farkas to kind of come in and just kind of piggyback on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Oswald. As the chief indicated, we are at a place where we used to be years ago, where we have a great sense of teamwork between departments. We have communicated. Anytime we find an issue that's fire-related, we, of course, relay it to fire and vice versa. We do work as a group effort in regards to a lot of these violations. Unfortunately, the chief's in the same boat I am, is when an order is issued, nothing gets resolved. We are forced to refer it to court. And again, once it's in the court's hands, I'm pretty much reporting now instead of enforcing. So we are trying to get progress in regards to these issues. It is, I say this, trust the process. It may not be a 1, 2, 3. It will take time, but eventually we will get there.
Just don't stop.
Don't take
Mr. Farkas, while you're there, if you have a report, while you're there, you can go ahead and give your report.
You good?
Is there any other, before we go ahead, any other questions for the Chief Pernesti? Very good. Mr. Farkas, while you're there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Lately, as many have noticed, we've been dealing with quite a few hotels in regards to board ups. I've given a report on the last 3 hotels, the most recent, Journey Inn. I spoke with their attorney today, and it is confirmed they plan on demolishing that structure to the ground and putting it up for sale. They also indicated they're going to be taking the home to the west of the hotel as well. That's a residential home. They're going to take that one down. Moving to the north, that would be the Journey Inn. That is actually under reconstruction. The ownership is aggressively repairing the interior and exterior of the structure. So his plan is to reopen, to get some income to continue the repairs. And the Days Inn by the mall, unfortunately, that one has run silent. Again, I'm going to refer that one to the court process, and with the law department's help, nudge that one along. In regards to that, I am working with the safety service director on a demolition plan for multiple homes that unfortunately have come to a point where there's no choice but to demolish. We do have multiple wards that will be affected. We are preparing a list of those wards, and Kenny Washington Avenue is on that list. So with that being said, we're going to present something here probably next meeting. I'll speak with Mr. Lundy in regards to what that looks like.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Farkas? Mr. Lippian?
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Is there any update on the street between the Safer Auto Parts and the McDonald's that's fallen into some disrepair? I know you'd looked into that before. Is there any update on that?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Lippian. Mr. Parker was investigating that. We have determined the ownership. He did send out a notice to said ownership. I would imagine now it's a matter of getting the personnel or the bids out to get the repairs fixed, because I was at a car show on the weekend. It's pretty bad. I didn't realize it was that bad, but it is in motion.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Farkas, I know you and I have been communicating about the old Moen building, but I get calls about it almost daily. Could you just give us an update on what's going on with that?
Mr. Chair, through you to Mrs. Davis. Yes, I just spoke to the ownership. He's in Florida, and as I spoke with Chad, his case is in court. They have his attention, and he really wants to resolve this, so he is motivated. They have submitted some information in regards to trying to obtain design review compliance. Keep in mind, this is an industrial district. They are permitted to have some storage outside. Again, the residents, or at the time, residential zone right across the street, heavy industrial, you do kind of bear that risk when you have a house across from a manufacturing company. But they are working towards getting compliance and making it somewhat more aesthetically appealing. So it's in motion.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the problem, as you know, Mr. Farkas, with the residents, they're looking at these large windmill parks. So if they could put up screening or something so that it isn't so in your face, because it looks horrible. The building looks horrible. The sidewalks around the building look horrible.
Mr. Chair, through you to Mrs. Davis, we did receive that complaint on the sidewalk. That also Mr. Green has investigated. I had, I want to say, a good 40-minute conversation with our architect regarding different alternatives to, one, meet the code, but yet meet their needs, some kind of compromise that would, again, aesthetically appease the neighbors, but yet still supply them what their intent is to recycle these particular products. It seems like we have that in motion. We have been working with the fire department in regards to assuring safety for access in and out to the building. It looks good. It just has to, again, it just came in, I think, last week, and so it's under review.
Thank you, Mr. Farkas. And just for the record, I'm Mrs. Mitchell.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. My apologies.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Farkas. Elyria Police Department, Captain Grooms. Is your microphone on, Mr. Grooms, or Captain Grooms, I should say?
How's that?
That's good.
Thank you. I have very little to present tonight. A few things having to do with personnel and equipment, all positive. On July 24th at 3 p.m., we'll be promoting 3 individuals. Lieutenant Welsh will be promoted to captain. Sergeant Legas will be promoted to lieutenant, and Officer Thacker will be promoted to sergeant. So if anyone's interested in coming and being part of that, they're more than welcome. We have a new hire started the academy today, so things are progressing with new hires. And then the last thing I have to present is this has been a long time in the making. Our in-car cameras are being installed starting today, and should be completed within the next 2 weeks, the majority, with the exception of maybe 5 vehicles. So that's good for us. Other than that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions in regards to what's being brought up here, Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President, do we have a camera for every patrolman out there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we do.
Okay.
And we will have that, not only body-worn camera, but for their patrol vehicle as well.
Okay.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. This may be a question better for Chief Pelko, but when the mayor spoke about the cameras downtown Pioneer Plaza, there's always been talk of a beat cop downtown. And you may not know the answer to this, but is that in the works?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Mitchell, we do currently have an officer walking the beat, Officer Fairbanks. He's going to be doing that 2 to 3 days a week for right now, and Lieutenant Welsh, who's running our patrol division, is really making efforts to make that a full-time position. Staffing has an effect on that. We would like to see 2 officers, so that there's 2 at all times. But it was successful in the past. We got to really know the business owners, which was beneficial, and we'd like to make that happen full-time for sure. You're welcome.
Very good. So I don't know if our individuals are here or, oh, sorry, Mr. Lippian, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Thank you, Captain Grooms, on the mention of the promotion. I remember when I attended yours, and by all accounts, it seems you're doing a great job.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank
sir. We've gotten a lot of complaints about fireworks, and I'm just wondering if you might be able to give us a number on how many, if any, tickets were written for fireworks violations this season.
I don't have a number on that, but I can certainly find out and either, email you or present it to council at the next meeting.
Very good. So, Captain Grooms, I don't know if Mayor, and I don't know, I know the 2 young ladies who aren't here, I believe, for this presentation that we were going to talk about. But
correct, they are not here.
I think it would be remiss if we didn't, if we were to table this and do it. I'd love to have them recognized and acknowledged, but for them really to be here, to see what they did is just incredible, for these two kids, what they did. And I think it would speak volumes to that. And I would think that maybe we could try to do it at the next council meeting. I think that would be great. I know we were all prepared tonight, but maybe something happened where they weren't able to make it here tonight. And so I think the accolades for them wouldn't do it justice, really, for what they did.
I agree.
So I think maybe we can try to schedule it for the first meeting in August. Mr. Locker, did you?
Yeah, the clerk's office will try to contact them.
What's that?
We'll try to contact
Sure.
the clerk's office.
Sure. Okay. Was there any other questions for Captain Grooms in the police department? All right, I'm going to continue on. Assistant Safety Service Director, Miss Calvert.
Thank you and good evening. I wanted to give an update on the Spruce Up Elyria program since we are in the height of construction season right now. As of today, we have 7 projects that are complete. We have 50 projects in process. We have a number of applications that are still in the review process. And with that, I just wanted to again give the Community Development Department and specifically Kathy Meslick some recognition for all of the hard work that they're doing over there to make this happen for residents in Elyria. So Kathy, for those that don't know, she is a project manager and rehab specialist, and she really has some unique skill sets that allow her to make this possible for the city and the residents. So she does everything from verifying quotes and scopes of work and working with contractors from beginning to end, so making sure that they're registered with the city through the contract signing, validating that the work has been completed, and then processing the payment to the contractors for the work. So it is a lot of work that they're doing on top of everything else, and I just want to make sure that I recognize them for all that they do. and the way that they interact with the residents so professionally. There's a lot of residents calling to find out where their application is in the process, and they are always so respectful and kind, even when delivering the news that it's going to be a little while before your application is processed, given the volume. So a special thank you to them. And then I also just wanted to remind everybody that in the next week or two, we are going to be hosting, we'll be communicating dates for the walking tours for the comprehensive plan. So that's an opportunity for residents to join us and the consultants and doing an audit of their neighborhood. So we'll be looking at things that need improvement, things that we like about those neighborhoods, so we can capitalize on that and see more of what we want and maybe a little bit less of what we don't not want through that zoning process. So please be looking for those dates. We'd love for everyone to join us, residents, council, businesses in the area, whoever would like to join and have a voice in what the future of Elyria is going to bring.
Very good. Any questions for Ms. Calvert? Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Calvert. Since you gave an update on the Spruce Up Elyria program, do you have any update on the assessment-based sidewalk plan passed through council last year, how that's progressing? And this might also be a question maybe Kathy could answer as well.
Yeah, so that program, through you, Mr. President, to Councilman Lippian, that program is administered by engineering, so I do not have that data for you today.
Any other questions for Ms. Calvert? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President. I did have somebody that was asking about that program, and they said, you know, they were towards the end. And, I was really hoping, and I just told them, I says, maybe hang on, get your information squared away, call community development. So we get towards the end, and there's some things that fell through, and there's that little money left over. So there would still be an opportunity for somebody, if they were prepared, they could still jump aboard and take advantage of this?
I believe at this point, we probably have more applications than what we can fund.
Yep.
What I would recommend, however, because this program has been so successful and we would like to launch another round, is that they contact community development and at the very least get on a list so that we can announce when there is a future round of funding available for the program.
So if we could approve this, I'm sorry, through you, Mr. President, if we could approve this for next year, this would be even better. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Calvert. Mayor Whitfield?
Through you, Council President, just to build off of that real quick, you know, Councilman Oswald, when you first introduced this to council, I don't even think ARPA funds were in play at the time, and we were trying to figure out how could we fund something like this. And I remember the finance director stating that Issue 6 funds could be used for a program like this. So, you know, our vision as an administration is this is something that we should look at perennial. This should be an annual program. We cut it off at a certain dollar amount because, as we can see, the demand is there. And this could be something we just continuously do every year because it just improves people's homes, it increases the value of neighborhoods, and just brings a sense of pride in the city. So we think it has the economic benefit as well as the pride benefit.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, any other questions for Ms. Calvert? All right, thank you, Ms. Calvert. Assistant Safety Service Director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, President Stewart. For my time, I would like to invite, we have Macaulay and company here, Justin Macaulay and a few of his staff. As you all know, per your request, that they would give us quarterly updates on the progress they're making and the activity they've engaged with. They have been a phenomenal resource to us in the city, engaging with our city leadership in terms of department heads, advocating on our behalf, working closely with us as liaisons, as advisors, as grant writers. So they're going to share with us some of the activity over this past quarter and then be available to answer any questions you might have.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Justin McCauley, 19660 Roslyn, Rocky River, 44116. Good evening, Council President, members of Council. Good to see you. Thank you, Mayor, for having us back. as Mr. Williams said, quarterly update. Just here to check in, provide you some details on things that we've been working on. I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues, Shannon Strachan and Sean Lowe, for the update. And I think the only thing we failed to discuss in prepping for this was that Sean and I are wearing the exact same suit, so we're going to try and stay separated. Here you go, Shannon.
Good evening, Mr. President and Council. Over the last...
If you could, Miss, if you could please, for the record, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Shannon Strachan, 916 East Drive, Huron, Ohio. Wanted to, I guess, give a short update, both on some activity in Columbus, as well as some of the activity that we've been doing over the last quarter. Currently, we are working on a couple of grants. We have the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Fund. We're still waiting for, we're going to apply for the voucher program on behalf of the city. There's $115,000. I think I reported on that last time. We've got an update that the voucher program probably won't roll out until about September. So we're still looking at that. At that time, we had talked with, I think, engineering and the administration about lighting for the downtown district, and whether or not we can create a larger program with the NOPEC NEC funds, and so the administration's looking at that. So that's coming down. There's a Nord Family Foundation grant that we're looking at. The administration has several different ideas with regard to history of Elyria with Black and African Americans. There is a program they've been looking at for a while, so we're waiting to apply for that grant, hopefully on August 1st. Land and Water Conservation Fund, which is the grant that we got a few years ago for West Park to install the trail, which I understand, I think it's about 95% done there with the pickleball courts and restrooms. That grant is coming up again, and I'm hoping to meet with administration and Carrie Reardon. Potentially, there might be an opportunity for the Pocket Park to look at some programming there, but that's kind of in its infancy. That's not due till November, so we're just starting on that. There is obviously OPWC. I'm sure Ms. McKillips will be talking about that. That program is coming up, and nominations for that are coming up. There's a couple of programs that came through the operating budget, which I'll let Sean talk to you about. And so there's some opportunity there for the municipality to do some more. Right now, we also are turning to some submitted and pending grants. We have, I think the chief talked earlier, assistance to firefighter grants that has the rescue truck with the transport capability. So we're hoping for that one this round, since we didn't get the ambulance last time. There's also, I think, a regional grant that the chief filed with Elyria Township for radios, 17 mobile and 40 portable radios. Waiting on that one. Still waiting on the Safe Routes to School grant. See if that, when that comes out. OEPA recycling grant, the LEAF VAC system. Still waiting on that one. And then obviously we have that federal earmark for the Southeast Sanitary Sewer Interceptor. So we're also waiting on that to see if that gets announced. Otherwise, we're continuing to work on, obviously we meet with the administration at least twice a month regularly, and on other programs. Most recently, I think we talked about Oakwood School and the community center, and trying to figure out how to move that forward. So we worked on that question with ODNR and got some results there. We also got an extension for the OEPA. We had an F-450 a truck and chipper unit, and we actually got that grant 2 years in a row. And this last one, the city's been unable to get that order, the 450 truck. It's just the supply chain has been tough. So we did just receive a 6-month extension. So we have till the end of the year to get that ordered. We just received that. And the other was, I think we've been working on with the OCJS on the community violence grant, trying to get that, I think we connected the city with the individuals there so they can work with Urban League and get that situated so they can work on that a little more efficiently. And that's about it, I think, right now. I would like to have Sean give you an update on the operating budget, which also has, like I said, some funding for grants as well, and we can talk further about that with questions.
I did have a question in
Sure.
regards to, maybe this is a question for the mayor or to the law director. I know there's been talks about, you're talking about the pocket park on West Avenue, correct? So is that a dedicated park, or there's been conversations that maybe has not gone through that dedication yet? Can someone answer that question, or?
Yeah, I think that's, through you, Chairman, or Council Pres, that's actually, y'all voting on that tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're moving forward and where that was at over that. Mr. Lippian?
Thanks. Through you, Mr. President. I also did have a question with the Safe Routes to School grant. Thank you for that update. There was some discussion that you'd look into Representative Manning writing a letter of support for the grant. Do you know if she ever was able to
Yes,
do that?
actually, she had already written that letter. We submitted it with the grant application. I had forgotten that, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Sean S. Lowe, S-E-A-N, Lowe, L-O-W-E, 5790 Great Northern Boulevard in North Olmsted. A large part of what we have been doing and communicating with the administration over the last quarter surrounded the state operating budget for the next two fiscal years, FY24 and FY25. Along with cities across the state, through advocating with the administration, we're able to get the General Assembly to remove a number of provisions in the operating budget that would have been harmful to cities, including prohibiting municipalities from collecting local income tax on some deferred compensation and stock options. Another provision that was successfully removed from the operating budget revolved around prohibiting municipalities from charging property owners to fund a rental registry, which a number of communities use for, their building departments and maintaining a list of landlords, to communicate with property violations and such. So those were two key priorities that were removed from the operating budget. As my colleague Shannon said, there were a number of new funding pots or existing funding pots that were replenished that the city will be exploring. These include $350 million for the brownfield remediation program. That's $175 million each fiscal year, which municipalities can apply through their county land banks to receive funding to remediate brownfield sites, whether it's an old manufacturing site, a gas station, a dry cleaner, somewhere where the land would be contaminated and prevent future development on those sites. So there is new money for the next 2 years in that program, including $150 million for an additional year of the Building Demolition and Site Revitalization Fund. Again, that is applied through the land bank. That would be to demolish abandoned homes, other properties, get those sites ready for redevelopment or creation of public spaces. There's $124 million available for FY24 for the Water and Sewer Quality Program, which is a program that the state has had several rounds for previously. So those are just 3 examples of new grant opportunities that were funded through the state operating budget. There is also $700 million available in what the state legislature is calling the One-Time Strategic Community Investments Fund. We're still waiting on more details on exactly what that would entail, but it could fund capital projects, including transportation projects, road and bridge construction, public transportation, other brick and mortar projects. I think we're still waiting on guidance on what the application process of that could look like. It may be similar to the capital budget process where you would have to appeal to your members of the General Assembly, going through the Mannings and formally requesting a specific project and getting their support. So we're waiting on additional details on that. I have a call into Senator Manning's office to see if they have some details that they can provide. But now that the operating budget is signed by the governor, the next kind of big legislative vehicle would be the next biennium for the capital budget, which would present an opportunity for the city to submit a request to Senator Manning and Representative Manning for a capital project similar to Oakwood School.
We appreciate you coming up and, the work that you've been, the grants that you've been pursuing. If you could, through the administration, maybe just kind of give us an update of what was presented here tonight in some type of a spreadsheet or what you're looking for, just so that we can kind of have a history of what's coming down the pipeline over here, what you're applying for. That'd be great. Mayor, did you want to make way?
Yeah, just if there's things that you all, so one thing is that right now we're in this kind of unprecedented moment, I would say, and federally and statewide, where there's so many resources available, whether it's the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, the state still has some ARPA funds, the traditional programs that exist out there, and there's just broadband money that's just got allocated recently as well to states. So there's so much out there, and our goal is to try to continue to attract as many of those resources to Elyria as possible. So when you all have ideas, I just want to just implore you to continue to share those ideas and needs, because we can figure out and do some matchmaking and see if there's resources out there to help make these ideas come to fruition. So don't hold back on any ideas that you might want to see for the city, because sometimes we limit ourselves. We're like, oh, well, we can't afford that as a city, but there could be another resource out there that could help us make it happen. So don't limit yourselves in terms of what you're thinking.
Very good. All right. Thank you for coming up. Oh, Mr. Lippian.
Thanks to you, Mr. President. This is a question for the last speaker. You mentioned the brownfield remediation grants. What if a property owner, not a municipality, but a property owner within the municipality, wants to use brownfield money to remediate troubled land?
I'm trying to recall the rules from the previous round, and this is something the Ohio Department of Development, through the rulemaking process, may change. But at least in the last rounds, if the owner of the property is responsible for the contamination, they were not eligible to receive funding. So let's say, an old dry cleaner closed and some other owner now owns that property and did not contribute to the land being contaminated, they could apply for funding. But if it was an old manufacturing site and that same manufacturer continued to own the contaminated land, they could not get funding through that program.
Good. Again, we appreciate you coming up, and if you could share that information with the administration so that we can, the rest of the council can kind of review what you've been working on, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. McKellips, Engineering.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. President, I'm going to go ahead and answer the question from Councilman Lippian. The sidewalk assessment program is still available to residents that want to participate. This is a program where the city fronts the cost of sidewalk repair replacement, and then it goes on to your property taxes as a special assessment and paid back to the city over 5 years. We do have several people that are signed up for it, and we are waiting for our contractor with the concrete road repair program to come on board, and we're going to look at them first as far as pricing, and then if we need to, we'll go out and collect other quotes from other contractors. So right now we're just in a waiting game, and I know we are a gentleman from, he's not here. I've had a gentleman ask every once in a while, where's my sidewalks? Where's my sidewalks? So I promised him that he'll have them this year. So we are ready to move forward when we have a contractor on board.
Very good. Mr. Lippian?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was going to say, I think I know exactly who that gentleman is. And yeah, he has had his name on the waiting list for quite some time. So I know the goal is by the end of this year. Do you have an estimate on when we might be able to start picking some people off the waiting list and begin implementing the program?
September, October.
Ms. Davis?
Through you, Chair. The sidewalk program, does that entail, which we've already looked at, is in the census area, where the low-income census area, is this in the same for the sidewalk repair versus the census? I'm trying to differentiate the difference between these two, where you're saying there's a payback when the census area says no.
You are correct. So this program is available to anyone throughout the city. There's not a specific area. And because this is a special assessment program, there's no requirements or no pre-qualifications that are required. You just have to own the property, be willing to sign a waiver, and have a special assessment put on your property taxes. And we'll take it from there. I know through the Spruce Up Elyria program, if we do have, which we have, we've had people that approached our program, and they were in one of those census tracts that qualified for the Spruce Up Elyria program, and we did send them over to that program to see if, you know, if they would qualify. I don't think we've had anyone come back, so hopefully those folks that looked at that other program were able to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay. Very good. Any other? All right. Continue. Oh, Mayor Whitfield?
But through you, Councilor, I just wanted to make sure she mentioned the road resurfacing that's about to kick off, because that's really important, and but you were going to let her keep going.
Yeah, she was just I was waiting for anything more on the beautification. All right, let's hear it.
All right, so street resurfacing 2023. We were actually just contacted today by our contractor that we have on board for the asphalt part of the street program, and they plan on starting this Wednesday with milling the streets. They plan on starting in the mall area and then work their way around counterclockwise, and they'll end up over in Councilman Sarah's ward. They believe they can get most of this milling done this week, and they plan on, weather permitting, to start paving next week. So the turnaround on this program should be fairly quick as far as the asphalt portion. There will be other work that will need to be done following the asphalt, you know, when we adjust the manholes and that type of thing. But on the concrete repair part of the program, we're going out to bid next week, and so we should have a contractor on board within 3 weeks or so. And then I'll be able to give you a timeline for that. Our West Ave water main project, that one is moving along at a pretty good pace. Almost all of the main line, water line is in the ground. They'll finish that up, probably 98% of it this week. And then next week they'll start on water services, and there's a couple of sewer repairs they need to do also. Our favorite project, the East Side Relief Sewer. Our excavation team on East Bridge Street, so we're doing that big dig right there in front of Smitty's and the BP gas station. That poor crew, they've run into so many obstacles. Now they've run into rock, so they're trying to hammer out rock around on the sides of the big storm sewer that we need to deal with, and that process is gonna end up putting probably an extra couple weeks onto the timeline for that. But they keep moving forward, and as soon as they get enough of the storm sewer exposed to make room for the crew to come in and form up the big chamber in the ground, they'll do that, and then that crew will move back over to Dilworth and keep installing pipe from there. Our Poplar Street team is making progress. The intersection of Olive and Poplar was closed last week in anticipation of the crew getting to that point. The goal right now is to put enough pipe in the ground so that they can maintain sanitary sewer flows. And then they're gonna jump back and they need to install some sanitary sewers, deal with the sewer and the water services, and get some storm sewer put in. And they need to do that in order to prep for the restoration of Poplar Street between Longfellow and Olive. So that section of Poplar Street is scheduled to get restored this fall. Just a couple quick notes on a couple other projects. Our East Broad Street project. We were originally going to start last week, and then we were going to start this week, and then we were going to start next week. But the last thing I heard is that right now the contractor is planning on starting the week of the 24th. And for this project, they're going to start on the west side of the project. So they're going to be working from East River to Prospect, and we'll call that phase 1. So that's the section that they'll be working probably majority of the rest of this year. The contractor does have till September of next year to complete the entire project from Abbey to East River. Our Cleveland Street roadway project, we bid that out. We have a contractor. Right now, we're just working with ODOT to get the award through their process, and then we can complete the award process on our end. And then hopefully within a month or so, we can get a pre-construction meeting going with the contractor, and we'll be able to provide a better timeline as far as what's going to happen on Cleveland Street. A couple other projects just to throw out there that are on the horizon. We plan on bidding out here soon in the next couple weeks the Wesley Ave Water Main Project and the Penfield Drainage Improvement Project Phase 2. And then also, by the end of the summer, we'll be doing the Phase 3 of our lead service line replacement program. And that project, the water team received about almost a 50% grant, forgivable loan, towards that work. So we're excited to keep moving forward with elimination of lead service lines in the city. And Mr. President, that's all I have.
Any questions? Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. President. So a question on the ODOT portion, the road diet that's coming down Cleveland Street. How far does that go?
It starts where ODOT left off. I think it's around Hawthorne.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll continue to Gulf Road. On East Bridge, there will be some pavement marking changes, but we're not changing, for the most part, once you get to the railroad tracks, we're not changing those lanes. We still need the 2 lanes heading, it would be towards downtown because of the amount of traffic that turns onto, Park, East River.
So the path is clear for them to go ahead and get the road diet portion of theirs done.
Yes.
Without that problem there in front of BP.
Correct. Yeah, so they could get started right away on that east end and keep moving forward until they reach Gulf.
And I know you've answered this for me, but for the record, the contractor that's coming in to do the road work on Cleveland Street this next round is doing the curbs and aprons on the opposite side of the street.
Yep, correct. The water main contractor did the curbs on the north side, north side. And then this contractor for the road project will do the curbs on what I'll call the south side.
Thank you.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. President, more comment. I'm hoping that the Chronicle does a article on this big dig in front of BP and Smitty's. I took a picture of a guy standing on top of that pipe, and you can't fathom how big it is and how deep it is until you see this little dinky guy on this big pipe. So you got 16, 18 feet from the pipe, and then I don't know how big the pipe is, and then they got to go 4 foot below that. They've got a shoring system that is so cool that kind of drops down into place each time they dig. And they've got a bucket that they sit down there and they're filling up with a track or a bucket down there, filling up this. It's incredible, and it could be a great story and some good pictures. I know they've been taking them with the drone. I'd sure love to see something in the Chronicle. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
Chair. Mr. Phillip, is the Foster Avenue project different? Because I hear you said you haven't given out the the work for concrete. When I seen it all marked off, and I was so happy that Foster was getting from between State 57 and Furnace Street, it was all marked up, and I'm thinking they did work over there. So I'm wondering, is this some other repair coming that's not, from us directly?
Through you, Mr. President, I believe that's the section of Foster that we are applying or receiving OPWC funds for.
Thank you.
And I do have one other question, and we'll let you go. In regards to East Avenue, the runoff islands that, kind of go filter through those little islands where all the grass is at over into there, is there a way that we can kind of have, because they're getting crazy over there with the growth, high weeds. I mean, I know we have a challenge with our cutting our grass with all the residential properties, but that's kind of getting out of.
We can notify wastewater. Wastewater takes care of those, and then several of them we were planning on completely rehabbing. It's about time that, the filter media, the soil needs to be re-energized. But I was going to say, earlier in the season, Director Lundy had come to me and mentioned, the mess that those
The growth, it's just getting in the way.
bioswales are in, and I believe it was the street department or whatever just went through and mowed everything down, so it sort of gave us some time to work on a plan to get those rehabbed.
All right, very good, thank you. All right. Bear with you.
One thing I wanted to share, you've heard all these reports from different department heads, and I think we all can agree we're heading in the right direction. And some of these things take a little more time, but you've heard the spruce up, the waiting list, the journey in finally being, taken care of. I think all of us sometimes are embarrassed when we come into town and look to the right or bring in guests, the fact that that's being taken care of, the traffic enforcement that's happening, the beat cop, we've heard residents over and over requesting that. The grants that have come in, you heard the road resurfacing that was just mentioned. One of the roads that is on this list is Sugar Lane, and there's been a number of small businesses on that road that have been really requesting for us to fix Sugar Lane because it's taken thousands of dollars of equipment down that road and it's rough. So fixing that. And then Broad Street. I know it's been decades. You talked about your dad and how he felt about Broad Street, and finally we're at a place where we're going to be resurfacing and redesigning Broad Street. So I would encourage us, one, to celebrate the wins while we have them, and when they go to break ground on this Broad Street, I would love for us to go out there together and really celebrate that as something, because we were able to secure, funding from NOACA and the ODOT to really make that happen, and I think it's worth us celebrating these wins. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. Speaking of celebrating, Mayor, Ms. Reardon isn't here this evening, but Oakwood School, the trails, at Oakwood Schools, at West Park, the trails are almost done, and we are planning a grand ribbon cutting ceremony. We've got some ideas. So as soon as we have a date for that, we'll let everyone know, but I'm really looking forward to it. Because if you haven't seen the trails, they are fantastic. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, moving forward, President's referrals and remonstrances. I have number 1, community development. I have number 2, community development. I have number 3, community development. I have number 4, finance. I have number 5, finance. I have number 6, finance. I have number 7, finance. I have number 8, finance. I have number 9, finance. Item number 10, Finance. Item number 11, Finance. Item 12, Finance. Item 13, Finance. Item 14, Finance and Utilities. Item 15, Finance and Utilities. Item 16, Finance and Utilities. Item 17, Strategic Planning. Item 18, Utilities. Item 19, Utilities. Items 20 through 25, received and placed on file in the clerk's office. Petitions and remonstrances from council members?
There are none.
Oh, excuse me, petitions and remonstrances from the lobby.
I was just going with that, by the way.
Gotcha.
So there is none. So, yeah, we have
You
several.
didn't have to call me out on it.
Bob Yost, 260 South Logan, representing Ridgewater, entrance to 113.
Mr. Yost, please come up, state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Bob Yost, 260 South Logan. I do represent Ridgewater LLC. It was brought to my attention that there was a committee meeting last week, which didn't exactly go on our way as far as the discharge of our road onto 113. 2 years ago, Planning Commission approved my subdivision in total of about 220 lots. And on that drawing, that road was discharged onto 113. At that time, right after Planning Commission did grant us that approval, we contacted the Division 3 of ODOT for the state to apply for permission to go on to 113. And we were told at that time that we couldn't do that. And in conjunction with the engineering department here and the people at ODOT Division 3, they came to the conclusion that if there's like 6 parcels of property that are about 100 by 100 that go to the center of 113, if those were taken over by the city of Elyria, that discharge could happen without any problem. At the same time we did or that came later, but before that, we did talk to both the chief, fire department, as well as the police, and they were in favor of the means of egress for safety and fire into the subdivision. We do have another means of egress onto Fowl Road and one onto one of the existing roads Potomac, thank you. Yeah, so there are 3 means of egress to get in and out of the subdivision. If you haven't been there and looked at it for a while, we have built probably about 60 units between myself and Ryan Homes in the last year. The landscaping's going in on all the existing homes. It really looks nice, and we're continuing to have a lot of activity to buy these lots and build these new homes. So I guess that's just the overview from my point of view, and it'll be up to council as to what they decide to do as far as the discharge onto 113 and picking up those pieces of property. I think it's important to know, too, we did, as developers, we did increase the size of the sewer so that there's the capability of greater capacity for future development going forward, whether it's to the north, to the west. There would be annexations that would be needed. I believe most of it is in township in both directions. I think there's some to the east that's still in Elyria, but you have to get through a piece of township ground to be able to do that. But we did increase that sewer for flow. Any questions?
Very good, Mr. Yost. So, thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Patrick Spears, 267 Northfield Drive, first responder training facility.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Spears. I live at 267 Northfield Drive, Elyria, 44035. Good evening, everybody. City Council, Honorable Mayor. I speak today in support of the First Responder Joint Training Facility. As an auxiliary police officer of 12 years in a different jurisdiction, and as an Elyria resident, I understand and appreciate the high importance of public safety within the community. In order for our public safety services to be safe and effective in protecting our city, they must be properly and continuously trained. I'm of the belief that this facility would help our safety force accomplish this in tenfold of our investment in such a revolutionary facility and partnership. It would draw participation from safety forces from other jurisdictions, act as a recruitment tool, bring economic activity to our city, and would put Elyria on the map in Northeast Ohio as a beacon of dedication to community safety. I understand that there are concerns, but I ask the council and the public to keep an open mind. This issue requires a holistic but realistic approach, taking all factors and communities into consideration, such as the nearby special needs school, our rural communities, and nearby residential areas. We cannot allow misleading information, preconceived notions, assumptions, or even certain personal passions to sway or dislodge a realistic conclusion as to the positive or negative impacts that this facility may or may not have on the community. These and other unique points must be taken into consideration, but I'm of the opinion that a realistic outcome would be increased safety and improved performance from our public safety forces, increased safety for our children, our communities as a whole, and the relationship between the public and safety forces, all of which are of paramount importance. I hope the council and the community will consider all relevant information as they make an informed decision on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spears.
Janice Manos, 832 Bennett Drive, no subject.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Jan Manas, 832 Bennett Drive, Elyria, Ohio. I have a tumor in my throat. I have lived in Elyria my whole life, my career. I probably could be your mother's or grandmother's. I'm 83. I lived on Bennett Drive when it was the first house ever built in 1967. And I am not going to die with people coming into my street and taking over it. I have a person that bought a house next door to me in her 20s. She has 7 to 9 people living there, and they all pay her rent. And her parents had told me that. They all have cars. Well, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. We're going to have to change some laws in Elyria. Everybody can't have an apartment building and a single-family house. We have never had a problem on our street. I get up in the morning, and there's a car parked here, 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 by my driveway, all the way up the street, where the man that cuts my lawn has to drive 5 houses down. I went up to one of them, and they're all young, and I asked them not to park in front of my house. I have macular degeneration in both eyes. They park here and here. I didn't mess with the police. I went right to our mayor. I showed him my pictures. They don't even park on the street. They park right by your driveway, so you can't even drive in. I pay taxes just like everybody else in that street, and I deserve to have my driveway here, my car parked here, 2 cars parked here, and then I don't care if they have 20 people living there, but they aren't parking and going in front of my house. I called the mayor's office, and I went out and took pictures of every car and every license plate. And this isn't just happening on my street. I don't live by Drug Mart or Sam's Club. I live on a street I love. I worked at the Board of Education in Elyria for 30 years. I worked for a doctor for 15. And I am not going to let a bunch of little snot-nosed kids tell me they're not moving a car when a man comes to cut my lawn and he has to go 5 houses up to drive his tractor back. When I asked him, he said, "Good, if you hit my car, I will effing sue you." They are messing with the wrong 83-year-old person. If I have to go to an attorney, I talked to our mayor, and he was very nice. I showed him the picture of my driveway where they parked in my driveway, and I had to go on my lawn. Now, I'm not going to be forced to move. They don't park across the street from me. But the people next to them, they must have yelled at them, and I'm the oldest one on the street. If the police department will check, I have never called them or asked a car to be moved. But if something is done on the street, who do you think they come to? Oh, you old lady, you called on us. Well, like I said, I don't like going to Avon buying nylons at Penny's. I don't like going to Amherst. My dad was councilman 20 years in Amherst. I love that little town. I called Jack. He was wonderful, but he told me something I didn't like. So I didn't mess with anybody else. They told me the police couldn't do one thing about it because that was public parking. Well, beg your pardon, I'm public too. And my taxes went from $888 to $1,300 a half. And these kids are having people pay them so this girl could pay her house payment and her taxes. It ain't gonna happen next door to me. I made a really nice chart, but they told me I could only talk 3 minutes. I went 3 minutes. Are you people crazy? So I have my chart, and I'm going to give it to Matt Lundy, and he can look at it. And if any of you here would like to come over and spend a week at my house, I have extra rooms, and have at 6 o'clock in the morning, have one door slam, and then 10 after 7, another one goes, and when they go, they turn their radios on. They're not courteous, and I'm telling you right now, you are going to see my cute 83-year-old face until laws are changed in Elyria. You know, when we built our houses, we didn't have great big trucks that were 2 cars length. We didn't have that. They had a mom and a dad, and they parked in the driveway. This isn't going to happen at my house.
Okay, we appreciate you coming up. We understand your passion and your concern regarding your home and everything like that. Obviously, the mayor's been on notice, and the safety service director, and I'm sure the police department will all kind of work collectively together to come to a, what we can do to help resolve the issue briefly.
I want
briefly.
2 little places in front of my house. I don't care if they park on the road.
Okay, we'll look into it. Mayor, briefly.
Yes, through you, Council President. I just want to thank you for coming up and sharing. We had a similar.
Sorry, I am really nervous. I told her I've never been to a court in my life. I won't know.
Well, you did great.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yes. So you did a great job. Again, thank you. It's me over here, Mayor Whitfield. So thank you again for coming up. Thank you for.
Seeing you.
Yes. So yes. Okay. So we'll make sure to work with our police department. I've seen the pictures. What I've seen in the pictures, literally cars hanging into her driveway. You ever seen people, they shouldn't have tried to park that close and they still tried? So it's a real issue. So we're definitely looking at it from a law enforcement standpoint. But I think one thing that Councilman Lippian has done that I think is try to foster the sense of good neighbors. And I think in the city, we just got to foster a spirit of being good neighbors to one another. Some of this stuff the government can fix, but some of it, we just need to be more nice to each other and look after each other. So, I think as the councilmen in that ward, we can work together and see how we can do some kind of community building there because, like you said, you've been here your whole life, 83 years old, you've paid your dues. These snot-nosed kids need to, respect their elders, and I agree with that. So we'll try to foster that sense of community. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you.
Okay. We appreciate you coming up. We'll work on it. Mr. Sarah, briefly.
Just real quick through you, Mr. President. If they're actually blocking your driveway, you need to call the police right then and there. You can't call me days later. I can't do anything about it at that point in time. But if they are truly blocking your drive, call the police right away.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Clerk.
All right, Mark Mathis, 1730 Gulf Road, codified bicycle routes.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mark Mathis, 1730 Gulf Road, Elyria. Thank you. On January 19th, 1999, Elyria City Council passed Ordinance 99-5, establishing 2 bicycle routes in the city. The very existence of these routes is not searchable on the city's website. I've searched and nothing comes up. I'm not sure how anyone would even know about them. I am asking City Council to consider rescinding this ordinance and removing the signs for the following reasons. There are currently better, shorter, easier, and most importantly, safer ways for cyclists to travel from these 2 points, particularly on the Bridgeway Trail established by the Lorain County Metro Parks. 2, 25% of the intersections with turns have no signage. Certainly, anyone using the routes and relying on the signage would get lost. 3, there are 2 sections that are my biggest concern. The first is Gulf Road between Hemlock and Ford Road in Sheffield Village. Although the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, 50 or 60 or more is not uncommon. This north section to Burr Oak on Ford Road is, in my opinion, not suitable for inexperienced riders. The second is Abbey Road between Sycamore and Duffy, where the signage directs cyclists to walk across Route 57, where there is not a crosswalk. These 2 areas present serious safety concerns, and I believe they are not appropriate to be part of a codified bicycle routes in the city of Elyria. I would encourage any city official to actually ride these routes. This will give you firsthand knowledge and you'll be better able to assess my concerns. I am fully aware that this is not the most pressing issue facing Elyria or society, but I believe it is low-hanging fruit that can be easily accomplished. It will remove an ordinance for which the original purpose no longer exists and will help make Elyria a safer place to live. I have emailed an expanded version of my comments to the council clerk's office and some other city officials. I ask that you please read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis, for your comments.
Danielle Coward, 9645 Murray Ridge Road, no subject.
Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Danielle Coward, and I live at 9645 Murray Ridge Road. And I'm here to talk about the training facility. I'm happy to have this training facility for the economic development that it may bring to Elyria, and I've been impressed by Lieutenant Frank's dedication to making sure that the gun range has as little negative impact on the community as possible. I do want to make sure that there are provisions in place to mitigate the disruption to residents, particularly the people who are working on the plan now, including Lieutenant Frank. They're retiring eventually, so noise above 70 decibels over a prolonged period of time may start to damage your hearing, and rifles, shotguns, and handguns vary between 160 and 170 decibels. I also wanted to bring up another group that I have not heard mentioned at that meeting, and that is veterans. The gun range and training facility is in the 709 census tract area. That area has 4,888 veterans according to the 2020 census. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs statistics state that 7% of veterans experience post-traumatic stress disorder at some point in their life. That number goes up to 29% of veterans who served during Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. So just in the census tract closest to the proposed gun range, we're looking at the possibility of between 340 to 1,400 range of veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder who could be adversely affected. I hope the council keeps that in mind moving forward and makes sure that there are limits to the decibels of gunshots and explosives allowed outside of the facility and into the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Rabarsic, 361 Rockfern Avenue, Firework Communications.
Thank you, President Stewart, the entire committee, and Mayor Whitfield. It was probably about a year ago I came here with the concern for the first time about the fireworks issues in Elyria outside of the city fireworks. I was very happy to see that a committee was put together. There is a city ordinance right now, but I think most of us would probably say there was still a lot of fireworks being shot off as soon as it gets warm and through the holiday, and I'm going to guess it's going to continue. Matter of fact, I was getting ready to come here with my son, and the M80 went off at about 5:30. The concern that I have, and that I'm also hearing from people in the community, is we haven't done enough to communicate to the residents of Elyria what the city ordinance is. It was in the paper when we first got the ordinance passed. A lot of people in the city do not read the paper. And they sometimes don't go on websites to look at what's posted on the police website. Chief Pelko has been awesome. He responds to all of my emails, so has Mayor Whitfield. But I think we really need to take a look at, if this is going to get better, we have to make sure that we communicate in some way to the community to let them know what the ordinance is. And we also had talked a year ago that the fines for this need to be pretty steep. And I related those fines to what the city of Lorraine was doing as well. It's just, I feel the people that are doing these large fireworks, if you're going to stop them and say, here's a $50 fine, that's not going to stop them. And the other thing is, when I brought this up a year ago, we are trying to help the police department. I know numerous people that were calling that know the ordinance, and dispatchers were very frustrated as well. And that is something that I think with proper communication and getting it out to the community, that maybe we can lessen the calls to the police department as much. This is a small percentage of the people that live in Elyria, but it's not like a neighbor having a bright light on their garage that affects the person behind them. This is someone that is shooting off large consumer fireworks, and it affects everybody in that area. I live over by Rockfern Avenue, and it's been like World War III over there. It needs to get better. And we did the first step with getting the ordinance started. I know sometimes in the city water bill, there are some things that are printed on the city water bill, but a lot of people don't read their city water bill. They just look at what they owe, and they don't read what's on it. My sister, for example, said that she read on the city water bill that there was a shredding day, and she said she was luckily she saw it. I think it needs to be, I think the water bill is an avenue to go, but I think there needs to be a separate sheet of paper in that water bill, and I know that's going to cost a little, but if this problem is going to get better, we have to let the community know. And then as far as going out and giving fines, we've gave them the opportunity of something they open up every time to see this is what is going to happen. So I would like to work with I know there was a committee that was put together for just fireworks. I would love to be part of that. and I plan on working with the police department in communication with Chief Pelco. I think also we need some kind of special email system to the police department or a different way to communicate, because I think some people are still afraid to report them. But this has to be kind of a community work together to help the police department. You can ask my son, and I was joking with Mayor Whitfield. One time I sent him an email, I said, if you gave me a old police cruiser with a spotlight, I'll give you a bunch of addresses where all the fireworks are coming from. Me and my son have actually gone out and called to try to help the police to say it's coming from this residence. But I'm seeing fireworks 2 blocks away that should be caught. I mean, these are over the top of the trees and they're loud. But I would like just the committee to look at the possibility of trying to communicate more with the city as far as letting them know this is what's going to happen. I think that's our main issue right now is communication.
Right.
And I think we've taken the first step, but I think we need a big step with communication.
Sure. There's always room for improvement on everything that we do. We appreciate you coming up. For the record, Mr. Barsik, what was your address? All right, very good. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Tolet?
I'd like to comment. Mr. Abarsik's right, communication of this. I have a legal question on this, though. One of the things that I noticed this year worse than ever, if you go into Drug Mart or Sam's Club, they're all selling fireworks. The city of Elyria, do we have the ability to ban the sale of fireworks through ordinance?
Through you, Mr. President, that's something that my office would have to take under advisement. However, I suspect that the answer is probably no. But it is something that I'll look into.
If you would, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolet.
One thing that they do is notify us when they ship.
Thank you. Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Mr. President. I don't know if they have something that they do sign. I do know back in the day when it was against the law to fire them in the state of Ohio, you did have to sign a document there. It didn't have any effect. Yeah, just for the record.
There's more discussion that we'll have down the road in regards to that. Appreciate you coming up and discussing it.
That's all the petitions from the lobby.
Reports of standing and special committees.
There are none.
Resolutions first reading.
Sponsored by Finance. A resolution approving a list submitted by the Safety Service Director for the collection of delinquent inactive utility accounts and directing the Clerk of Council to certify said accounts to the Lorain County Auditor.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second by Mr. Schneider. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2023-20. Sponsored by Utilities. A resolution requesting railroad companies owning infrastructure within the city of Elyria to implement and adhere to a maintenance program for improvements and repairs and said infrastructure and related appurtenances.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this resolution is passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2023-21. That's all resolutions first reading.
Resolution second reading.
There are none.
Resolutions third reading.
There are none.
Ordinances first reading.
Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance authorizing use of city-owned real property located at Ely Square for third Thursdays and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
And notice this is an emergency.
Not according to my paperwork.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. President, yes, the legislation has this listed, and my agenda has it listed as an emergency.
Okay, we're going to go with emergency.
There might be an updated,
So if the motion does concur, or?
does the motion concur with the emergency?
Yes, I do.
Second concurs.
All right, on the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Through you, Mr. President, the clerk is saying we did not get a second, or we didn't record the second, the motion.
I'll second.
What did she say?
The second, we need to confirm that the second was confirmed on the motion.
I said that.
Ms. Mitchell is
Mitchell
saying that she
seconded.
did confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2023-91. Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance authorizing the use of city-owned real property located at Ely Square for purposes of a seasonal farmers market and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
This would also be an emergency as well, Mr. Callahan.
This paperwork I have here does not say emergency.
Okay.
Mr. Callahan, there was a new agenda laid at our seats.
Sorry, excuse me, I didn't have my microphone on. Through you, Mr. President. This is not a scripted meeting, so your paperwork would show, if you have a copy of the ordinance, it lists that there is an emergency.
Okay, well, I'll show you after the meeting mine that doesn't have an emergency.
Okay.
Okay, moving forward.
Through you.
Moving forward. On the suspension, so we have a suspension, we have it as an emergency. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-92. Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance authorizing the city to petition the Board of County Commissioners to annex certain real property owned by the state of Ohio and located at State Route 113 in the vicinity of West Ridge Road, Elyria, Ohio.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second. Second by Mr. Todd. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, Mr. Oswald, myself, Engineer Schneider, and Mr. Yost, we met and they explained this. I know I was adamantly against it at the committee meeting, but once I met with them and Mr. Oswald, we had a better understanding, so I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-93. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the waiver of a building permit-related fees for the Diocese of Cleveland and Elyria Catholic High School for construction projects at 725 Gulf Road, Elyria, Ohio.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-94. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance authorizing the Finance Director to transfer funds to the specified accounts.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-95. Sponsored by Finance. An ordinance amending ordinance number 2023-34, known as the 2023 Permanent Appropriations Ordinance, to change funds in various accounts.
Mr. Tolet.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-96. Sponsored by Utilities and Finance. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement with Black and Veatch Management Consulting LLC and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-97. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Water Transmission Main Phase 2 Pre-Inspection Pipeline Improvement Project.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-98. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the East Side Relief Sewer Diversion Structure Project at the Wastewater Pollution Control Plant.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-99. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance designating real property owned by the city of Elyria located at 1504 West Avenue as a park.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-100. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Foster Avenue resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-101. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Lake Avenue resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-102. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Abbey Road South resurfacing project and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-103. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Chestnut Ridge Road resurfacing project and declare emergency.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-104. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the 2023 crack sealing project.
Ms. Mitchell?
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Simmons. Is there any further discussion? On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-105. That's all ordinances first reading.
Ordinance is second reading.
There are none.
Ordinance is third reading.
Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance amending section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the city of Elyria, Ohio, and the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located in the vicinity of Murray Ridge Road, Infirmary Road, and Garden Street, Elyria, Ohio, from R-MD Residential Medium Density District to S-I Special Industrial District.
Mr. Callahan?
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
It would be on the third reading.
Oh, third.
Be on the third reading. And that's the second concurs.
Yes, the second concurs.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-106. Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 1135 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, to the City of Elyria for a first responder joint training facility at real property in the vicinity of Murray Ridge Road, Infirmary Road, and Garden Street, Elyria, Ohio.
Mr. Callahan?
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed under suspension of rules on its third reading.
Second.
Second by Mr. Center. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2023-107. That's all ordinances third reading.
Committee calls.
Community Development requests the Law Director, Safety Service Director, Building Inspector, and Engineer on Monday, 7/24, beginning at 6 p.m. Items referred. Joint CD Finance requests the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on 7/20, immediately following the Community Development meeting. Finance requests the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on Monday, 7/24, immediately following the joint meeting. Utility Safety Environment requests the Law Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on Wednesday, 7/12, Wednesday, 7/12, beginning at 6 p.m., all items referred. And Strategic Planning requests the Mayor, Safety Service Director, Finance Director, Law Director on Monday, 8/7, immediately following council.
Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mr. Lippian?
you, Mr. President. Thank you. I do have just one item. As we're talking about fireworks being included and water bills conspicuously included, I know we've talked about deer concerns also being conspicuously included. I got a letter in my mailbox today from a gentleman who has experienced problems with dogs and wants there to be an annual reminder about the laws that we have in the city about dogs. I don't know if it's possible, but if we do a conspicuous mailer with the water bill, perhaps before school goes back into session, about fireworks in anticipation of New Year's, or deer, or dog laws, or just certain laws that we want to spotlight to draw residents' attention to, that might be really prudent.
Thank you, Mr. Lippian.
Through you, Council President, we have our communications team meeting tomorrow morning, and I'll bring this up as a part of the recommendation.
All right, very good. Is there any further miscellaneous and unfinished business? Mr. Callahan?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, through you. Most of those of us that live on the north side have seen that Winter School is in the process of being demolished. I've been getting some calls, and some other people have been calling the school board. I guess they shouldn't be calling the school board. At some point in time, anybody that went to that school or had children that went to the school, there will be some bricks available for them for a keepsake. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Any other miscellaneous? Mr. Pileski?
Just a reminder to the clerk's office that I'll need a certified copy of 2023-90. Thank you.
Anything else? If not?
Mr. President, seeing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who seconded that? Mr. Lippian? Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Stan Reeser. His brother was my best man and sister was maid of honor.